Hello, everybody. We do have, again, technical issues, but I'm happy to say that we at least have Sandy on screen now. So we know that, so we have our speaker here today already logged in. Our dilemma right now is just sharing the screen. So Sandy's working hard behind the scenes right now, trying to get that logged in. Otherwise, I will do a brief little introduction to say who our speaker is today, as most of you probably already know who this gentleman is. But Sandy MacLeod, he is the CEO of the Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Institute of Canada, or commonly known as HRAI. He will be presenting today on climate change and the refrigerant transition. So just bear with us still for a few more minutes while we're figuring out the sharing issue. If it comes to it, hopefully we can get the presentation shared via my computer, if not his computer. So we will get this presentation going off in the next few minutes. Just please bear with us a few seconds. Unfortunately, with technology, we can't always account for it, and there's some issues once in a while. So just bear with us for a few more minutes. I'm waiting for people backstage. I can see them. Oh, it looks like it's going to start working. Yep, we are good now. See, just to bear with us. All right. All right. And Sandy should be on screen now, so you should be able to see Sandy now as well. So wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I've already done my little introduction for Sandy, so no need for me to delay a little bit longer. So Sandy, kick it off. Thank you so much for presenting today.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I will focus on the refrigerant transition, but I want to talk just a little bit about HRAI and climate leadership and some of the things that link back to what's actually causing some of these concerns around refrigerants. So many of you probably are aware of what HRAI does and who we are. We do represent manufacturers, wholesalers, and contractors in Canada, coast to coast. And, we deal with, everything from TSSA to Environment, Climate Change Canada, to the National Research Council, Natural Resources Canada. And as, many of you know, lots of regulations in this industry, from products to building codes, et cetera. We engage with literally all levels of government, municipal, provincial, and federal. And the municipal piece has definitely been more active in the past couple of years with cities and different municipalities taking a focus on setting their own climate targets. We promote our members' interests, and then we also protect our members' interests. And, one of the sayings we like to refer to, if you're not active with government and you're not at the table, you might be on the menu. So, we want to ensure that we're regularly engaging with government to ensure interests of this sector are covered off effectively. So, as I said, I'll start out with a couple of thoughts on climate change, because it kind of leads into the whole conversation around the refrigerants. So, I'm not going to convince anyone there is climate change, there isn't climate change. Everyone has different viewpoints, but there's definitely some facts that are kind of in the marketplace, and we just need to be aware of them when we're having conversations with government. And many of you have probably seen this chart, but we've seen a dramatic increase in the concentration of CO2 over time. And that's probably one of those things that you really can't ignore. And it isn't much different than what we were dealing with ozone layer depletion, 20 years ago. And, government, when they see these types of things, will act. And we're definitely seeing some of those things. And then we're also seeing all kinds of stuff happening, whether it be glaciers, water levels, severity of storms, more hurricanes, hotter. There's a whole bunch of stuff that just kind of seems to be in the marketplace that you got to pay attention to. I was just in British Columbia last week, and the fires in the Kelowna area last year, really pretty devastating. I heard a presentation from the fire chief there, and it was interesting. He said they've had two 100-year fires in the last 20 years or so. So things are definitely kind of changing in the environment. We know there's election issues looming. Climate will play into this coming election. I think the big issue probably will be around carbon taxes and even potentially incentives. Those two things impact our industry in a big way. If the carbon tax does continue in any fashion similar to what the Trudeau government put in place, we will definitely see more electrification. And the opposite's true. I think if the carbon tax is reduced and the oil and gas area continues to be supported by the federal government, we'll probably see a slower transition to electrification. And the same thing goes with incentives. So, when the federal or provincial government puts incentives in place, we see products move in a slightly different way than if there's not incentives. So I know some wholesalers right now are carrying more heat pumps than they want to have and less air conditioners than they might want to have. And that partially is because Greener Homes was stopped rather abruptly. Paris Climate Agreement, Canada has signed on to this. So we do have some commitments that we've made. And when I get to the refrigerant transition later, that is one of them. One of the things that, when you think about Canada's a small country and what does it really matter, we're not meeting what even to date, what we've said we would meet. And if you look at this chart, you'll see that Canada is really a laggard when it comes to what the G7 nations have been able to accomplish. Now, that is mostly due to our oil and gas business in the West, but it is definitely something that Canada can't claim to be an environmental leader at this point. We are definitely behind what some of the others are doing. When we look at our own marketplace around what we do in heating and cooling buildings, this is being done elsewhere. So, we're not necessarily blazing a new path as much as we really can follow what's been done in other jurisdictions. I had the opportunity of listening to a speaker from Sweden at the Vancouver Heat Pump Symposium, and I stole this slide from him. And there is definitely ways to lower emissions in buildings, and it is happening globally.
Hey, Sandy, can I jump in for a second?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I can't see any questions, so if any are popping up, you can please stop me.
Absolutely, no wonder. So we actually aren't seeing the slides as they're going down through. So I'm not too sure if it's lagging or if it's not properly put into the slideshow mode.
So you're not, where are you on slides?
We can see the climate change leadership and the refrigerant transition.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We see the first one. Yes. I noticed to the first, you mentioned one of the graphs or something. And I was like, okay, we can't see that. So.
Okay.
And Sandy is gone. Wonderful. Okay. Well, I'm glad I'm still here. So give me 1 second, guys. We'll get Sandy back in here. I'm sure he'll figure out quickly that he's been kicked out for some reason. I swear my hands didn't do anything. So bear with me just 1 second. Yeah, we'll make sure that he gets the slideshow correct. Yeah, I was quite confused too when he mentioned a map or something, and I was like, okay, we can't see it. So that's why we have us in the background, make sure everything runs smoothly for you guys. Just please bear with us. Well, the one thing that's been pretty cool is some of you guys in attendance here today have been showing saying where you guys are from, and it's been pretty cool. So I know we have somebody from, is it North Africa was the one gentleman? West Africa, sorry, from Sierra Leone. So welcome. So it's pretty cool that we have some people around the world coming and listening in on our technical training days. So thank you everybody for joining around the world. Hopefully we can get Sandy back in here. If you guys want, while we're just waiting, we got an Oshawa, Ontario. Joe, that's where we're located too. So, well, howdy, neighbor. Yeah, why don't you guys keep putting in the chat where you guys are from? We can get some good conversation going. We got White Rock, BC. I was actually at the conference Sandy was mentioning as well out in Kelowna, BC. So BC, beautiful province. I always say my heart is out there. We got West Africa, fantastic. I heard my email go off. I'm wondering if I have an email from Sandy. Yes, I have the slides now. So if push comes to shove, I can do the presentation now. Okay, wonderful. I will download those. All right. So where else are some of you lovely people from? Where else we got in the world? Oh, I see we got New Brunswick. St. John's and Barrie, Ontario. Oh, awesome. St. John's, New Brunswick. I haven't been there, but I have met people that are there that are from there, and you people are very nice. I mean, most Canadians, we're all pretty nice. So, still not quite back in, but we got Stony Creek. We are Retta McKinney branch from the Sierra Leone. Retta U.S. member. Okay, wonderful. Okay, I have the presentation now loaded up. So if Sandy has an issue, we will just get him back on, and then I will make sure that the slides go as promised. So let me shoot him a quick email. We got somebody from Ottawa, southern Manitoba, lots of Canadians, which makes sense. Oh, Sandy's back, so let me put him back on screen, guys. I did get your slides, Sandy.
Okay, so let's have you run them. There's clearly an issue on my end, so
no worries whatsoever. Let me
go about 10 slides in and I can pick up there.
Okay, so you guys are going to see the back end and everything, so just bear with me while I pull this up. Can you guys see this? Can we see this properly? Does it look normal to you, Sandy?
I'm seeing still a lot of your back end.
Okay. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm going to stop for a second, and I'm going to try to share this slightly differently. Okay.
Technology is good until it's not.
Yeah, this is our 4th day, technical training day that we have run. And for some reason, this is the first time we've actually had issues with it. So, of course, we have 2 of them right back to back. I had the presentation good? Okay, so we're going to go back that way. I'm just not going to be able to see the presentation as it goes. So my teammates are going to have to monitor the chat for me, but I will pull up the screen. So you guys should be able to see it now. And let me pull up the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so does that look good? Can we see the slides now? Where were we, Sandy?
Yes.
Are we on this one or are we on?
Go a couple more.
Okay.
Probably the next one. Okay, I was there. So okay, since you guys couldn't see the slides up to now, I will stop here. Did anyone have any questions from my comments up to this point? Everybody good?
You come in the back end. I think we're all good. There's no.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So here is kind of when you look at what's happening in the marketplace kind of right now in Canada, and we talk about trying to get to net zero, we've got a pretty huge gap from where we are today and where our current policies will take us to what net zero might look like. So I'm not, trying to be a naysayer by any means, but we do have a pretty significant challenge ahead of us. And, our sector, heating and cooling buildings, is going to play a large role in this. So trying to figure out ways to significantly increase what we're able to accomplish in each of these years is going to have a huge impact on the success rate in Canada. Next slide. So when you actually look at the marketplace right now in Canada, as well as to kind of where things come from, there is a pretty big shift that's going to have to be required when we talk about what natural gas accomplishes today, and what will need to be covered off within the electricity side. And there isn't necessarily an expectation, as you can see, that natural gas will go to zero. It will diminish over time. So we're going to see natural gas be part of the solution for quite some time into the future. Next slide. So, lots of thoughts around what has to happen from a power perspective. And I think right now, heat pumps in our sector seems to be the biggest opportunity. There's definitely lots of support around geo solutions as well. So we're probably going to see those pick up in time. And then when we talk about power storage and things like hydrogen, they're definitely part of the conversation, but they haven't necessarily picked up steam yet. Next slide. So I'm not going to go through these. You've heard them all. When we talk about electrification and heat pumps, there's lots of concerns that are tabled. I will say I've had access to enough information that I believe the technology is there. I believe the equipment will continue to evolve. So the obstacles are not necessarily going to be anything that we're not able to solve from a technical standpoint. We do have some pretty significant issues ahead of us, and I'll touch upon a couple of those in a minute. Next slide. Here's one of the places where we start running into some challenges in our sector. This slide is actually from Natural Resources Canada. And it basically says that we don't have a problem with newer buildings. We've got a problem retrofitting older buildings. And roughly 70% of the buildings in Canada will need to be retrofitted to meet net zero goals. And the challenge with that is the time, you think 2040 or 2050 is a long ways off. From the same standpoint, you sit and you realize you're in 2024. Next slide, please. We're currently, and this is the last bullet on this page, we're currently retrofitting buildings at about the 1% annually rate. So in order to meet the numbers so if you think, it's 1% and we're trying to get there by 2040 or 2050, that means we have to increase that threefold, fourfold, maybe even fivefold in parts of the country. And that's where the significant challenge starts coming into it. Everything from who's going to fund it, how's it going to be paid for, not to mention what is going to be required from a workforce perspective. Next slide. So many of you are aware greener homes the plug was pulled on that earlier this year. We still expect the Trudeau government to release some version of a green building strategy as an election play coming up in the next 6 months or so. And we thought originally that this was going to be released already, but it hasn't been. But Natural Resources Canada has definitely been working on, I won't necessarily a replacement for greener homes, but there is a belief that there will be something that will play out before a next election. After the by-election this week in Toronto, that election might be pushed out maybe a little further than some people might have originally thought. But we're very engaged in this green building strategy conversation. So next slide. So, you know, I talked about how do you drive marketplace with, you know, things like, you know, awareness, and market stimulus is the big one. So whether, you know, whether those are rebates, loans, tax credits, etc., we've definitely been saying and communicating with government that it's pretty important that we need to see continued financial support if they expect to increase the volume of installations 3x, 4x in the future. And then on the supply side, it's all about things like supply chain management. I'm going to talk a little bit about that when I get into the refrigerant side, because I think there's some concerns there, at least in the short to near term, midterm maybe. And then workers is definitely going to continue to be a challenge. We did see the government in the last election commit to putting $100 million into workforce issues, not specifically the HVAC sector, but to retraining from a carbon perspective. Next slide. I've kind of already touched on that one. Next one. The other big issue that we continue to push with government is to engage us early. One of the things that government consistently does is drop programs, and then we have to get engaged with them for 6 months or a year to get them to the point that they effectively work. And sometimes that's the products. Like Greener Homes, when it was initially launched, had products listed that weren't actually even available in Canada. So really working through with government on marketplace education. Next slide, please. This, you know, I think is probably one of the key issues that we're going to continue to see. And we've got an aging workforce in all trades, so it's not just about the HVAC trade. Definitely, we have that same problem. But then something unique in our trade is this issue of reskilling. So across the country, we've got mostly technicians trained to be able to deal with gas furnaces. And now all of a sudden, we're going to be dealing with heat pumps in a more significant way. Exactly what does that workforce need to look like in the future to ensure that we can have proper installations and this equipment runs effectively? Next slide. So one of the things I'm happy to report is we put in for a number of different incentive programs, funding programs to the government for HRAI to be able to help the sector. One of the ones that was approved by Environment and Climate Change Canada is a skills gap analysis. And this is the whole concept of trying to determine if you've got a trained gas technician, what is the gap to get them to be able to effectively install heat pumps. So we're building out a program. We're going to test 100 current gas technicians and then be able to determine, you know, is it a 1 month in class assessment that needs to be done to get them up to speed? Is it a go as you can on your own 3 month X number of hours type of program? We've got a technical committee right now that's kind of working through all of the differences between, in some provinces and such, the trade and sorry, I just got a bit of a cough. So we're going through this process and expect to begin putting some technicians through this analysis in late August, early September. and have a recommendation back to government as to what this should look like by the end of the year. Next slide. So let me talk just a second about climate leadership. So HRAI is one of the few trade associations in North America that actually has taken a position on climate. And I'm back to that statement of, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. And we feel very strongly that it's important to have open discussions with government on these topics. Next slide. So we've gone to our membership and we've asked the question of, should we be proactive in this space? And I'm pleased to report that the membership continues to feel pretty strongly that we need to be part of this discussion. Doesn't mean that we need to advance it. Doesn't mean that we need to be lobbying for things like carbon taxes. But as decisions are made, HRAI wants to be seen as a voice of reason when government wants to have conversations about what the future might look like. Next slide. So our chair, Scott McDonald, he's a past chair now, in Ottawa actually had a press or a news release releasing our formal position and statement on climate, which is on the next slide. So don't expect you to kind of read it here. This is on our website. I see there's a note here about people wanting the slides, and yes, I will share them. Matter of fact, Leah already has them. The only thing I would ask Leah before you send them out, PDF them and send them out, so they'll be available.
Can do that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So our statement really says that we will work with government to help create a roadmap that actually will work. So, again, we realize that the pathway in Alberta is going to be very different than the pathway in BC, than the pathway in Quebec, and then the pathway in Quebec or in Ontario. Each region, each province is going to have different wants and needs. We're just encouraging them to have industry at the table as they're making decisions. So, enough about climate change. Let me talk about the refrigerant transition. Next slide. So, the refrigerant transition is not a Canadian issue. So I mentioned earlier on that we've signed on to the Paris Agreement, and then there's the Kigali Agreement that goes along with it. When you kind of look at what's happening from this perspective, this is all countries are going to be dealing with the phase down of HFCs. And we're committed to that, and we're kind of moving along that path. Next slide. These are the HRAI classifications, and you're going to hear me and others refer to the change from A1 to A2Ls. And technically, some of the new refrigerants will still be A1s, but the reality is most of them are probably going to fall into the A2L category. And the big difference between the two is they're slightly flammable. And I want to stress on the slightly flammable piece, because this is not like A3s that have very high flame issues, because now we're talking about propane and those types of things. So there is a change, and I think sometimes it gets a little bit overplayed when we talk about the A2Ls, but there is definitely a chemical change between the two. Next slide. So this is where things start getting a little bit complicated. So Canada has agreed to this phase down, and we've been working through the phase down. And then the U.S. technology transition rule in the EPA rears its ugly head last year, and they published a final ruling in December. And essentially, this says that the existing refrigerants that are considered A1s will no longer be able to be manufactured or sold, exported outside the US after January 1st, 2021. So all of a sudden, there's a big change in the US. There is a sell-through period, so they can produce products up to a certain point, warehouse them, and still sell them. Although there's a lot of the major manufacturers, all the ones that you would kind of know, that aren't necessarily all that keen on building product they might get stuck with. So there's this change in the US, and there's that old saying that if the US coughs, Canada catches a cold. This is definitely one of those situations that we find ourselves in. Next slide. So all this stuff's happening in the US last year. When we spoke with Environment Climate Change Canada and the provinces in 2023, they all kind of took the position that, hey, there's this thing in the US that might happen. When it happens, come talk to us, but we're not going to start making code changes and regulatory changes until we understand exactly what's happening in the United States. So we spent most of last fall, so kind of September through the end of the year, educating as many people as we could possibly reach out to about what this technology transition rule is going to look like and how it's going to impact the Canadian marketplace. CSA B52 was also going through a process to update B52, and to their credit, they actually got that done in December. So that timed nicely with what the transition rule did. So then we were able to kind of go back with Environment Climate Change Canada and the provinces and now begin a process to say, okay, these two things are done. The transition rule is now formal. We have the details, and we have CSA B52 Chapter 13 available for the marketplace. So that was kind of about a 6 to 8 month window from that September 2023 through March 2024. Next slide. So I don't know if any of you were familiar with OHRAI, but basically that is the regulation that oversees much of what I'm talking about from a refrigerant standpoint. It also deals with foams and fire retardant issues, and so it's not just refrigerants for our sector, but it deals with a fairly broad group within the refrigerant space. Next slide. So this is kind of one of the good news, bad news kind of situation. So if you look at the blue bars on the left and then the green graph that's dropping down, that green bar is what Canada needs to do to meet its phase down requirements. And the blue bar is what is our actual performance. So you can see that in Canada, we've been meeting our expectations. So Environment Climate Change Canada wasn't planning on opening up the OHRAI regulation until about 2027 because they didn't feel that we were going to have an issue meeting our goals. And it was this change in the US that kind of got them thinking that, we need to think differently about this. And that was all that education that we were doing last year from September through January, February. Next slide. So I'm really pleased to report, and some of you may or may not be aware of this, Environment Climate Change Canada did agree to open up the OHRAI regulatory process this year. So roughly 3 years ahead of plan. And, I give Martin Limas and our GR team a lot of credit for the work that they've been doing with Environment Climate Change Canada, the relationship we have with Environment Climate Change Canada. This was huge. When we first started meeting with them, we thought we really were going to have this 3-year lag issue. And now all of a sudden, we may be able to get pretty close to the dates that the US has. And when you factor in the sell-through period, we may not end up in a crisis situation. Next slide. So the submission just came out from Environment Climate Change Canada. And I think the 60-day window, I think it's due on August the 9th. And we have pushed out on multiple fronts asking key stakeholders for input. If anyone wants to see the document itself or the criteria for submissions, just reach out to HRAI, myself, or Gotham Shine or Martin. We can get that in your hands. We are asking industry stakeholders to submit their comments to us, and we will do an industry submission. That doesn't mean industry shouldn't do their own. So if a manufacturer or a large player wants to make their own comments, I wouldn't say you shouldn't do that. The advantage of putting them together in a common voice is there's just strength in numbers. If 1,000 submissions come in and they're all different, we slow this process down. Whereas if we're able to kind of smooth that out a little bit, put in an industry submission that represents 50 or 100 companies, it definitely makes the process easier for Environment Climate Change Canada, and then allows the process to move quicker than if they had to do individual submissions. So we're in the process right now of gathering those submissions, and they are trickling in. We're hoping to have enough by, say, July 15th to be able to pull together a draft response, and then we'll get that back out to industry for comments, and hope to put the submission in a few days before it's due, say August 8th or 9th. Next slide. So then you end up in a second area, and that's the whole building code issue. So you've got Environment Climate Change Canada that sets the guidelines of what equipment is allowed to come into the country, and as I had in that chart, that they're managing it by the refrigerant volumes, and that the HFCs have to drop over time. And then we've got the National Research Council, which oversees the Canadian Table for Harmonized Construction Codes across the country. Now, the government is trying to simplify the adoption process for building codes. And I say trying because they still are, at least this process has started, but building codes still are at the provincial level. And the reality is we've had to lobby each province individually on this process. And it's a bit painful, but it is what it is. And that's been the journey that we've been on since late last year, since November of last year. Next slide. So I don't have any red on this chart, so that's a good thing. So with all of the negotiations and conversations we've had with provinces, we are definitely making progress. So I think most of the building code officials and safety authority people are beginning to realize that the adoption of B52 into the building code, and then making sure it's referenced effectively, can avoid any supply chain issues in 2025. I don't think we're going to see much in 2024, although it looks like we're getting a little bit of it starting to bubble up, but I think it's more of a 25 issue. We have one province adopted, woohoo, it's Newfoundland. At least one's done, that's a start. And then we're running into some bureaucracy with Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, and even a little bit with BC, although we made some progress with BC in recent weeks. So I think that we've got a good shot of getting this all done by the end of the year, and we just need to keep on it. And we update the chart. The colors on this chart change a few times a month. As we're feeling like we're making some progress. So the good thing with Ontario, we've got TSSA has agreed that they will adopt B52 by October. So now we just have to have one line changed in the Ontario building code. So we're optimistic we'll get there. Next slide. A couple of other things that we're in the process of being able to put into the marketplace. Going to do a couple of brochures. One focusing on transportation, the other one on storage and handling. Next slide. And then there's the transportation issue. Next slide. So one of the things that we've been working with Transport Canada on is that it's currently okay to ship product charged with A2L refrigerants to what's called their first destination in Canada. But if they have to move, there's additional paperwork required. So HRAI, on behalf of our members, so if you're a member company of HRAI, we are completing what's called an equivalency certificate that we are going to make available to all of our members, that they will be able to use our equivalency certificate to be able to move product in 2025. So we've done the first filing. Next slide. And then we'll do a second filing for larger equipment charged between 2,000 pounds and 5,000 pounds. So first one was done on the smaller stuff. Going to wait, put that through, see if it gets approved. It should. We've had good feedback from Transport Canada. We've got a working group that's giving us some advice on how to get meet all the expectations. But we do expect that member companies of HRAI are going to be able to use this one certificate that will be ours, and then have no issue moving equipment. Next slide. The other thing that I would like to announce is that we have opened up A2L training. So one of the things that I often hear from companies, I spoke to a company, matter of fact, Monday, and they've got 90 technicians, and they're quite worried that their technicians don't really know what an A2L is and what tools are required and what issues they're going to be facing. So this is about a 4-hour online module-based training program that is now available. It's on our website. It's about $150 roughly. And for larger groups, we're able to do lower pricing. So this company that I mentioned before, they've got 90. They were looking for 90 passes. And then you do get a certificate of completion. So there is some early training available. We'll monitor the marketplace and see what more may be required. But we did want to get this in the marketplace for 2024. So it is live at this point. And oh yeah, just a couple of other things on. So what's going to happen in the marketplace? So, still R22 out there, went through quite a huge price increase a couple of years ago. That seems to have kind of played itself out, or flatlined anyway. 410A is going to be around for a long time because most of the installed base has 410A, and we don't see that changing much. We do definitely see a new series of A2Ls kind of emerging over the coming years and months. So next slide. Yeah, I think I mentioned that, so skip it. So you'll recognize, some of these. It looks like, right now 454B and R32 seem to be the leading A2Ls. And you will notice that the GWP levels are significantly less. So some of the existing equipment in the marketplace with 410A, you're looking at 2,000 to 3,000 GWP levels, and the US level is anything under 700. So R32 and 454B both fall into that grouping. We don't see any shortages. That could change, but there still seems to be enough virgin supply coming into the country to meet needs. As we make the transition away from A2Ls, A1s to A2Ls, it should be a relatively smooth move. Time will tell whether that is correct or not, but the experts that we've been engaging with don't see a supply issue emerging, at least in the near term. Next slide. I do want to mention RMC. So RMC is Refrigerant Management Canada. Refrigerant Management Canada is definitely a tool that we're lucky to have in Canada. So basically what RMC is set up to do is take used refrigerants back from the marketplace and recycle and reclaim as much as possible. And, so rather than having used refrigerants sit in a warehouse at a wholesaler or a contractor, we sure are encouraging contractors and wholesalers to ship it back to us. And we've got a process in place with literally every wholesaler in the country. You can ship it back to us. We pay the shipping. We take the responsibility and liability for the used refrigerant. We run it through a process to reclaim and recycle as much as possible. And then that is sold back in the marketplace. And technology's improved over the last 20 years. So, when it first was set up, I think RMC is just over 20 years old. It was really a destruction process. So we were destroying much of what was coming in. And I'm pleased to say now a lot of it is recycled and moved back into the marketplace. And that's it. Happy to take any questions. And I left some time.
So does anyone have any questions? I've been wanting to chat. I haven't seen anything come up in the chat, but if you have any questions, now would be the time.
I'll keep Sandy's information up here as well in case anybody wants to jot it down and reach out to him if they have any questions following today's presentation as well. I can't see the questions, so Mark, you're gonna have to handle this part, but hopefully somebody has one or two questions.
Yeah. I don't see anything coming up right now.
So look, so you've got my contact information. If something comes up later, please reach out to me. Leah will ship out the slides. I'm fine with them being shared. There's nothing here that's confidential. As a matter of fact, trying to get the word out on kind of what is happening. I'm definitely encouraging people to take the training. I think that calms some people down. I was at the heat pump symposium meeting in Vancouver, and one of the rooms there was this kind of almost panic about, oh my God, nobody knows anything and this is going to be awful. It's not awful. So, maybe you have at least one of your guys go through the training so you can start having the conversation internally. I definitely encourage, more and more people. It's worth the $100 to start ensuring people have a better sense of the marketplace. So
I do have some questions.
Okay.
So one from Terry Pike saying, my suppliers are telling me that 410A units will be phased out this summer.
So it depends on the manufacturer. So I won't name names, but I spoke to a large player on Friday because I had a call from a contractor who said, hey, I went to my wholesaler and I was told these things are going to be phased out, blah, blah, blah. So we've been more hearing that they'll be phased out in the fall, not in the summer. So I reached back out to that company, and what's been happening in that particular company's case is because people are worried about it being phased out, they're gobbling up supply. So, so a contractor maybe that would buy 50 units a month went in last month and bought 200 to ensure that they've actually got supply. So what that particular company's doing is they're trying to redirect some additional supply from Asia to make up some of the gap, and that will be shipped into Vancouver and then will make its way into the Canadian marketplace. So, so the expected conversions are going to happen in the fall, but every large manufacturer will have their own transition date. But we haven't heard anybody say they have a hard stop in the summer.
And we had another question is more on the RMC side. Do you buy the reclaimed refrigerant from contractors, or are we donating it?
You're donating it because RMC is a non-for-profit organization. There are other players out there that would probably pay you for it. They may be more selective on what they take and won't take. RMC has no limits in what we'll take. So whether it's clean, whether it's toxic, RMC was built to support the industry. It is a nonprofit company that is owned by HRAI. So it's not, you're not funding, you're not lining anyone's pocket by, as you say, donating the refrigerant. And you are helping to ensure that we continue to have supply in Canada. And the way RMC destroys any refrigerant that can't be reclaimed is when the refrigerant's brought into the country, we charge a levy on it. And then that levy is held in trust so that we've got money in the bank so that when we send a cylinder out to be destroyed, we've actually got the money to pay for it. So, it's a cycle to support the industry. I would encourage people use it. We may, as the value of refrigerants continue to increase, we may see more players in that space. And if the private market ever gets to the point that it can handle it, again, because RMC is nonprofit, we probably would exit that business. But I think we're a long ways from that point right now.
Also had a question, any effort from HRAI to promote heat pumps in Alberta?
So our role, this goes back to my comment about we don't necessarily take an approach of saying one thing is better than another. So I would not use the word promote. So when I talk about a heat pump symposium, we held one in Toronto, we held one in Vancouver. Mark, you were at the one in Vancouver.
Yep. It's great event.
I would call it more education than promotion. So I don't think we were there promoting heat pumps. I do think there's going to continue to be a need for natural gas as we evolve over time. And without government incentives and probably even carbon taxes, I think the heat pump adoption will be slow. It's fairly aggressive in Atlantic Canada. It's picking up in British Columbia, and it's probably non-existent in Saskatchewan and Alberta, and it's not very prevalent in Ontario at this point. So I think we're more in the education space than we are the promotion standpoint. What we are encouraging government to do is actually to promote the use of heat pumps to the general public. We are not in the business of reaching out to the consumer. That we're just not built or able to function in that space. We are a business to business trade association, not consumer facing. But will we hold a heat pump symposium in Alberta? It's not in the plans right now, but we are planning on doing one in Halifax. We'll do another one in Toronto. And as there's momentum and interest in the country, we're quite happy to do them in different locations.
Okay. And Rob Ray asked, the most successful heat pump project in Northern Europe was with geothermal, not air to air. And why is there not more of a push to do more of that in Canada?
So very good question. And I think the first thing is cost. So some of you, if you're Ontario based, you're probably familiar with the Green On program, which I think was 2017, 2018. There were large incentives in play in Ontario for geothermal programs to be sold and installed, and at that time it was a pretty active sector. The Ford government was elected in the summer of 2018, and they immediately killed the Green On program and the funding around it. So we have a government right now, at least in Ontario, that hasn't been as willing to fund green initiatives in our sector as the Liberal government was before. So I think the short answer is the European governments have heavily supported geo initiatives with lots of funding, and that just hasn't been the case in Canada.
And Joe adds also that the cost of drilling the well is expensive in Ontario. So it just kind of reiterates your cost points that you made.
It without incentives, it's just not. It's actually funny, and I won't name the name, but there's an industry person who's a big supporter of geo, and this individual has moved to a place where he needs to deal with a heating issue. He's dealing right now. His house is heated with a propane tank. And anyway, this individual isn't going with geo because it's too expensive, and he's an absolute supporter. So it's a cost barrier.
For sure.
Yeah. And Asava asked, do you have any studies on wastewater energy reclaim from heat pumps? Has HRAI done anything around that area?
We haven't. If you want to drop me a note, I can probably find some. I know some members have done some work. The one study that we did do, which some people might be interested in, there's a Dunsky study that we did with the Ontario Geothermal Association, and it's an interesting report, because what it says is that when we start hitting peak power, so take any province, doesn't matter which province you pick, but we're talking about Ontario. When you hit peak power in Ontario, it's very expensive to add supply. So, the government's not even really clear at this point whether they're going to try and buy it from Quebec. There's lots of talk about doing more small and medium-sized nuclear facilities. Lots of testing going on with wind and solar, but it's not real clear where that's going to come from. And if you invest heavily in geo, you reduce that peak. So you're actually able to do more with the existing supply if you would invest in geo. And I think the number is $40,000 per home. So it's actually, the government can invest in a single home up to $40,000 to help keep not having to increase the power supply through expensive methods. So that's a really interesting report. And if anyone's interested in it, just send me a note and I'll flip it out to you.
Sounds good.
I don't think we have.
I think that might be it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Leah, I'll let you take over.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sandy. That was a fantastic presentation. Sorry, everybody, for some of our technical difficulties, but we made it work and we went within the time zone too. So wonderful. Thank you, everybody, so much. So this is going to be our official wrap up. So thanks, everybody, for joining. As we've reiterated a few times in the chat and in our video portions, every one of these presentations will live long after on both our YouTube account and also on our trainingtrades.ca website. So if anyone's interested, I have posted Sandy's information also in the chat here as well. Otherwise, you can reach out to any one of us and we can help facilitate communication with any of the speakers. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This has been a fantastic day of learning. And we look forward to hopefully getting you guys joining in on our next one, which will be September 11th, which will be our heat pump presentation, which kind of is fitting to kind of wrap up after this next one. Joe, I see your question linked to the YouTube. They won't be posted quite yet as to today. We need a little bit of time to still download them and upload them. So we will reach out to every single one of you guys with the links so that you guys can go back and look at them as again. Otherwise, maybe Francesco has linked to our channel, so you'll be able to find it that way as well. Otherwise, thank you again. Each one of these presentations will also live as an article in our next issue. So make sure to check out our July-August issue, which will be coming soon in a few weeks to you guys. So thanks again. Thank you, Sandy. And hopefully we'll see you guys again.
Thank you, guys.